This is Viva Fry.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is JP Sears.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Tammy Peterson.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
Hey, this is Brett Kissel, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Thursday. How's everyone doing today? Hey, if you haven't bought your tickets for the Cornerstone Forum, we now have 9 days to get our food numbers in, so time is ticking, and there's individual tickets for sale that come with lunch and supper. There's also a table of 10, or you can get a table of 9 with a couple of the keynote speakers. So the ones that are still left, Kaylin Ford, I asked her if she wanted a booth for this event, okay, for what she's doing with this classical charter school. And she said, honestly, no, we're full. We've been having to turn away people. Like, that's wild. That's how successful what her idea is. Anyways, you could sit at a table with her for the event, okay? For the entire event, table of 9. Also, Ben Perrin, okay? BTC Sessions. You got any questions on Bitcoin? You can sit and pick the brain of a guy who teaches about it all the time, and that's with Ben Perrin. You got Rod Giltaka, firearms, anything you want to know about the CCFR, gun rights, you can sit at a table with him. 222 minutes. If you just want to have a chuckle, you can sit with twos all day long. Tom Bodrovics, he's the host of Palisades Gold Radio, and then we just announced Jim Sinclair, so you can buy the table that Jim Sinclair is going to be at. He's was in the military for 34 years. Okay, so 9 days left. Why do I bring this up right off the top? Well, because I've been talking about Silver Gold Bull. And Silver Gold Bull is one of the major sponsors of this event being in Calgary, okay? So when you're looking at some of the speakers, you should be like, holy crap, interesting. Get some friends together, come out, here's some interesting conversation, meet an entirely diverse, eclectic group of people. I mean diverse in the best possible way, folks. That word's kind of been commandeered over the last couple of years, hasn't it? Either way, that is May 10th in Calgary. That is being brought to you by Silver Gold Bull and Bow Valley Credit Union, two of the major sponsors here on the podcast. And just 9 days now to get your tickets for that with a meal included. So lunch and supper and everything else that's there. So hope to see you there. If you got any questions on silver, gold, buying, selling, storing, or using your retirement accounts to invest in precious metals, text or email Graham. It's down in the show notes. Of course, anytime you're on silvergoldbull.com.ca, just reference the SNP. It's April here in Lloydminster, and I think it's kind of beautiful. The wind, yeah, well, Chicago's a windy city. I don't know if they've ever been to Lloydminster. Holy Mackinac, it can get a little bit crazy out there. But, I mean, in April, this is kind of what we can count on, isn't it? The other thing you can count on is Guardian Plumbing and Heating. These guys have been keeping homes, farms, and businesses running smoothly since 2010. And they got a deal for the farmers out there. Guardian's efficient grain dryers and Guardian power stations aren't just available here. They're available all across Canada. The power station is an absolute game changer, giving you a 2-for-1 utilities, heat, and electricity from the same reliable system. It's an innovative way to keep your operation running efficiently and save on energy costs. For more information, go to guardianplumbing.ca. Farmers, I assume you've heard how precision planting has revolutionized farming with innovative technology to boost efficiency and profitability. What started with planter optimization now spans the entire crop cycle, offering hardware and software and upgrades that work seamlessly across brands and models, giving you unmatched control over your operations. Locally, here around the Lloydminster area, GoTech is evolving to serve you even better. Scott, your trusted expert, is still here, and now Jeff is joining the team, bringing fresh energy and ideas. Together, they're committed to delivering the same hands-on support you've come to rely on. And the Winter Conference has just kicked off here a couple weeks ago, so check out their seminars releasing on YouTube to learn more about how precision planting is reshaping farmer. That's GoTech. Substack. It's free to subscribe to, so make sure that you're paying attention there. You can also support the podcast through there. That's one way that, it's much appreciated. There's a little bit of behind the scenes. We do the debriefs and some hidden photos of, through the weeks, maybe the odd shot of the new studio coming together. Cornerstone Forum, as I've pointed out at the start, I'm going to remind you again, 9 days. 9 days, folks, to get your food orders in, which just means to get your tickets with food in, because after that we'll have to cut off the food orders and it'll just be plain old tickets. So if you're looking to be there all day and get a meal in your stomach, get your tickets today, okay? 9 days away. Holy Mackinac, that's coming quick. I don't know what it is with Mackinac today, but I guess it is the word of choice. Thursday. New studio is coming in 2025, and we're looking to do a little value for value. Want to get your name on one of the walls, whether it's your company or your name. We're looking for skills, labor, materials, and, of course, money. So if that's of interest to you, shoot me a text. If you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. Make sure to hit retweet. Make sure to do all the things. All right? Okay, let's get on to that tale of the tape. He's a historian, author, and political analyst known for his Untold History of Canada book series. I'm talking about Matt Ehret, so buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today I'm joined by Matt Ehret. Sir, thanks for hopping on.
Greetings and salutations. Always a pleasure.
It's been a while, and you're going to be out west here. Man, it's like, I don't know, how many days are we away now? Like 20, 24-ish? So,
yeah. 3 weeks. Ish.
Roughly. Ish.
Yeah.
So, you're going to be out here right away. Excited to have you part of my creation. We'll see how that goes. How have things been? You've been all over the place. Every time I talk to you, you're in a different place, and you're like 14 hours ahead of me or whatever the heck the time change was. So You're back in Montreal. Things are back to relative normal?
I guess so. Like I in the sense that we left to go to Italy first for a couple of weeks, and then Thailand when winter was just kicking our ass, man. It was so bad, and back in February, and I was wrecked, and we decided we're just gonna avoid the rest of winter, and of course, fate is sort of laughing at us because we got back and immediately got hit with a snowstorm a few days ago, and now this morning I woke up to more snow. So it's okay. Yeah, back to normal in that sense. Cold, dark. Yeah,
that's funny. Normal. I woke up this morning and we've been having I don't know, plus 10 days. Just like lovely. Almost t-shirt weather. I think it's t-shirt weather. Americans probably won't think that, and certainly some other places won't think that, but like t-shirt weather. And then this morning the wind was so cold and it started snowing again. I'm like, come on. Just relent already. Just relent. Let's have some spring here. What are you gonna do? That's Canada for you.
Climate changing, eh? Damn.
Yeah.
Changing climate. Bah.
We're all willing it along. Can it just warm up that 1 degree you're talking about already? We could take it up here. We could take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious, how was being out of Canada and kind of like staring at it from afar and then coming back in?
Well, I guess I was sort of staring at it from afar while the Justin was being sort of changed for a slightly more dangerous version of himself in the form of Carney. So that was a little bit demoralizing in that sense, though it was something I had known was already in the game plan. Like I had written an article back in 2022 making the point that the oligarchy is setting the stage for Mark Carney to replace Justin when he's all used up. And they've probably had their eyes set on this vetted character back in 2009 when the guy was the governor of the Bank of Canada. I think it's been a long time plan. Though here it is. Now it's finally there. So we're on the verge of an election, which I think is a bit of a garbage. But it's probably been pre-decided that he's going to be inserted no matter what. And that's not going to make it easy for patriots. And I wasn't enthusiastic. I was, it was a weird feeling because I'm having a very nice vacation in Thailand, chilling, beauty, beaches,
warmth, sun shining.
And so there's this cold darkness, kind of like this ominous cloud hovering over that whole thing. Kind of was not a spoiler, but it definitely was. It didn't let me get full on into fantasy mode,
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. So here we are.
What are your I wanted to get your thoughts on Mark Carney.
Hmm.
I mean, we can talk about a whole lot of things, but to me, like I try and I'm saying earlier today, I'm like, maybe Pierre wins, or some insane world Maxime Bernier steals a whole bunch of seats, right? Like he was just on Tucker, right? Maybe all of a sudden Canadians all vote and PPC just goes screaming off, and you get the point. But I'm like, it just seems like Carney is inching closer, or it's tough because you got the French. As we record this, the French debate's about to happen, and then you have the English debate. As this airs, the English debate will be tonight, or as it airs, it'll be. As we're sitting here, it's tomorrow, and this airs, it's tonight. Anyways, I'm confusing everybody, including myself. So like, is there a way things can change? Absolutely, I think 100% plausible. But let's talk Carney here for a few minutes. Your thoughts?
Sure. Well, I just released a couple of short films. It's part of a broader series. We might do four episodes. Each one small, 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I watched what you sent me, and very quick, lots of info. I think it was 8 minutes, wasn't it? Like it wasn't hard hitting. Yeah, tiny.
Yeah, it's very dense. But it's called the dystopic mission of Mark Carney. The first one's on the Carney is the ghost of Maurice Strong, just to sort of try to get a sense of the pedigree of like what type of character is he within the broader story of Canada and the world, more largely. So that was the first sort of story. The second one is on green bonds and oligarchs, just to get across Carney's dual role in both playing being a driving force within the Goldman Sachs managerial class. Like, so he's a top investment banker at Goldman Sachs, overseeing the growth of this massive speculative debt-based derivatives bubble that is the time bomb built into the Western banking system, which is designed to blow. And that's been the purpose of this thing going back many decades. So he's been playing a dual role in both overseeing the growth of this, as did Maurice Strong, as well as the solution to the oncoming sort of shock that this thing is designed to create in the minds of the victims, which is this green financial sort of response under a green bonds, Green New Deal, build back better for the world logic. That also involves his influence within both Chatham House, the royal families of England, especially the British royal family, Chatham House being sort of the queen of all think tanks. Sometimes its official name is the Royal Institute for International Affairs. Its American branch is the Council on Foreign Relations that was set up in 1921. This is what Hillary Clinton called the mothership back in 2009. It's sort of, I would say, the directing hand of a lot of the worst foreign policy and domestic policy decisions made by the United States as it was transformed increasingly into an empire over the course of the entirety of the last century. And Carney's the president of this. He's one of the 4 presidents of the British Chatham House, Royal Institute for International Affairs. There's a branch in Canada too. And so, I sort of tried to paint that picture of what this thing is as a coordinating body, as the sort of dark soul of the Five Eyes. There's a branch in Australia, one in New Zealand, one in South Africa. And this is what's been really, I think, just doing the most damage as far as creating unnecessary wars, regime change, assassinations, drug running, managing that entire global narcotics trade going back a century, even more than a century into the past, and maintaining a direct continuity. So he's got a very, also Bilderberg. So I've also pointed out in one of those videos his role on the Bilderberg Steering Committee. That's like one of the top influential organizations that was created by.
If I can pause you for a second, it's just like, when you think of all the things, like I'm thinking back to 2020, late 2020. Shaun knows about zero about any of these words you're saying.
Yeah.
And then I was given a list, and I forget who gave it. Was somebody in Saskatchewan. Forgive me, give me a list. And he said, someday you're gonna start to see more and more things, and you just here's the list that set me on my course. And I remember looking at a few of them, like, I don't know, Project Paperclip would be a nice, easy one, right? There's plenty of books about that, or Project Mockingbird, or, and on and on. And there was I think he had 21 or 23 of these things. And half of what you just said was on that list, and he's a part of them. Well, that's great. This is what I'm like, I've been partially sounding the alarm of Canadians, you really need to wake up. Not that anyone's really, the people that are listening have been awake for a long time. And I try and go, it can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. And then I just hear you rattle off of that. I'm like, nah, it's pretty sure it's that bad, Shaun.
Yeah, it's rough, man. It's a bitter bit of medicine, I guess we all got to sort of take in and swallow. But no, I mean, we're less inclined to be dupes and fall for garbage, weaponized narratives, because it's an information minefield right now, and the war really is the battle of the mind. So the more we know and understand this enemy, this parasite that's been sort of latched onto humanity for thousands of years, and it's recordable. You could actually identify and map it, and how this thing organized forever wars in ancient Greece, how it transformed Greece from being a bastion of democracy and liberty into becoming an empire as it declined and self-cannibalized, or how it latched onto Rome, turned it from a republic into this insane empire. You can is actually open to investigation and see how this thing maintained itself and sometimes rebranded its activities over the ensuing 2,000 years. But it's the same thing, right? It operates with the same MO. It's largely the same some of the top key families that are still there today operating the show from the top can trace their lineage back to the emperor, the Claudian dynasty, and various patrician families that ran the Roman Empire. So it's the same ultimate thing that utilizes certain occult rituals, mystery cults, initiation ceremonies that are designed to break us of our humanity, or its initiates of their humanity, and then reconstruct people in alignment with an identity more becoming to those who would maintain a transgenerational system of master-slave relations, which normal humans would just reject outright. We would never just willfully just adopt or accept adapting to that type of structure, but they're really good at being really bad. So they've mapped out certain techniques, both to get us to embrace our own slavery, but then also to shape their own and groom their own in a multi-layered system. And as I alluded to, this Chatham House thing, it was created with the funds of Cecil Rhodes, this most evil sociopath that raped Africa for a long time, got a huge fortune, and created a manifesto to create a secret society, which became the Rhodes Trust, or otherwise known as the Rhodes Scholarship Program, that would be coordinated through these roundtable movements that would also be funded by his massive pot of gold, which is what Carney is directly responsible for. Why they like these Canadian sociopaths, I won't call Carney a sociopath, but I think he is. But why they like these managers from Canada, like Maurice Strong as well, who was himself earlier on a Bilderberger, very close to Kissinger, very high up with the Rockefeller machinery, who was the father of the Green New Deal and a mentor of Klaus Schwab. Why they would like these guys, I don't really fully know what it is. Is there some family connections that go even further back, maybe to the family compact that William Lyon Mackenzie was rebelling against? I'm seeing that there is a possibility of that. But that's a challenge for other researchers to dig into. I think they would find certain things like that. But again, I think the more we know, the less we're inclined to fall for their tricks. That's my key takeaway from that.
Obviously, we don't know the outcome. We can speculate. We can certainly tie things to the bigger plan of maybe certain groups of people, i.e. the elites. Assuming. Well, actually, I don't want to assume anything. What do I want to say here?
We could make a different word, hypothetically, like hypothesizing.
I guess. Let's go down the road of Carney getting in. Your thoughts on what that means for Canada, knowing his background and everything he's tied into.
Oh, well, I guess it's always within a broader global chemistry. Like Canada, I've written a 4-volume book series, right, called The Untold History of Canada, that people could check out if they want like a bit more thorough analysis. Because my approach was always to sort of frame Canada from the standpoint that my governing hypothesis that animated my research and the writing and all of that was that Canada was never permitted to become a real country, and that we've always been a chess piece within the British Empire's great game. And so though we've come close at different moments of breaking free, there's been bright shining moments that have been almost completely wiped out of our history books. They are there. They're real. Some of our greatest heroes were, I would say, likely killed. Though people say, natural death for Daniel Johnson or the Premier of Quebec. I think there was a good case to be made for assassination for many of these cases, or just direct, regime change from within, as in the case, I would say, of Diefenbaker, possibly C.D. Howe. Point being, is Canada's played a role. So what has that role been? The role that I would say we've played generally is as a primarily wedge, a wedge run by the Privy Council, an unelected shadow government baked into our very Constitution of 1867, a wedge between any potential emergence of cooperative relations between Russia and the United States, which largely characterized a friendship more often than not over the last 240 years than anything. Russia did make the American Revolution possible with the League of Armed Neutrality and their leadership there. They came in and saved the United States at a time of crisis in the Civil War. It was the Americans that helped Russia build their first railway system between Moscow and St. Petersburg in the 1840s and 50s. It was USA, that brought in teams of engineers to support Russia in developing and industrializing with the Abraham Lincoln protective tariff and national banking strategy that built the Trans-Siberian Railway. It was Russia and the USA who together formed an alliance that was able to put down a Wall Street, London-funded fascist machinery in World War II. So more often than not, they have been friends, but Canada's role generally as the monarchy of the Americas, again, run by the Privy Council and a very unelected shadow government, has been to keep this wedge from this deeper cooperation, especially in Arctic development, which Lincoln aspired to, called for Alexander II, Sergei Witte, the finance minister of Russia. It's a long list of people who fought to unite around Arctic development. That's why Russia sold Alaska. That's a big part of why BC was so prized by the empire, and was why the empire fought so hard through bribes and threats and murder to keep BC as part of Confederation. And we're talking, 1870s, 1860s. So I think that Carney, he just gave a speech a couple of weeks ago saying that under no circumstance would he ever allow for Canada to play any role with Russia or the USA on Arctic development. I think he did that in the wake of Putin's offer, saying when Putin said everything is on the table, especially Arctic development with the United States, there's a sort of retooling of the relations between the US and Russia. And so the Arctic is an obvious one, a no-brainer for anybody wanting to find some points of like healing and real economic cooperation. Canada would benefit immensely. So he just sort of doubled down on that never happening. And I think he's sort of just sucking in or capitalizing on this renewed fake Canadian nationalism, which is just, it's really spreading, especially in Ontario and some of the, Maritimes, Quebec to a certain degree, but the whole talk of making Canada the 51st state really, I think, has worked against the Conservatives quite a bit. I think Trump made a big blunder, and it's helping Carney, who's sort of stepping into the image of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who kept Canada together, which I know for Albertans that doesn't mean much, but for Eastern, more brainwashed Canadians, that's a big hypnotic spell where they've been sold that was like the Lincoln of Canada, right? Who kept us together during the martial law of the October crisis of terrorists and referendums of 80 and 94. And it was, that's what Carney sort of, the branding
embodies.
Yeah. He saved Canada in 2008 with, by keeping us as the clean conservative banking sector of the world, that weathered the storms that hurt everyone else, but not us. Now, the fact was that was always garbage. We just have more opacity over our banking system. So we were able to get away with more than the United States did, who has more. They were forced to admit their shenanigans publicly, whereas we didn't have to so much. But the image and that's what's everything. It's perception which mattered more, and that's what he's sort of capitalizing on now.
I've been wondering about this, if it was a blunder by Trump. I go back to Peter Schultz, who was a guest on the podcast, and he talked about how the Liberals sent Trudeau down there knowing how Trump would react to him. Beat his chest and do the Trumpian thing, and you get the point. And ever since he talked to me about that, I was like, the Liberals are pretty brilliant then, if that is the case, when you look at what they did and how they galvanized the population from being like, you're going to have a super majority conservative, to now where we're even in discussion of the Liberals being anywhere near. And then, but okay, so you play that out for the first little bit. Okay, fine. But at this point, when Fox News is sitting with Donald Trump and going, who do you want to win? And he says, something along the lines of the Liberals. And the lady goes, like, Liberals? And he goes, oh yeah, they'd be way easier to work with. To me, what's happening now, and now you see Maxime Bernier on Tucker Carlson, and you've seen all these things. I'm like, it all lends to the Liberals winning the next election. Why would you do that? Because he has to know that Alberta is upset, that Alberta, when they started talking the 51st state, was very, it blew up. It was all over the place. The Jeff Rath video, now it's the 51st state thing. A serious conversation, that's not how I want to put it. Like a realistic one at this current state where we sit. No, not at all. Right? Like, you have to have a whole bunch of dominoes, but like, why keep playing that? And I go, I don't know if it's a Trump blunder at this point. I wonder what he's trying to get after with looking at Mark Carney, him knowing the background of this. I don't know. To me, it's there's more things going on than what I guess we just meets the eye.
Yeah. Well, early on, I was making the point, as soon as Trump launched into this narrative in late January, my warning has been, and I maintain it loudly, presuming that Trump means well and is following advisors or whatever. That's my hypothesis. Maybe he's totally dishonest. Maybe. But I'm still operating under the hypothesis that he's a patriot who means well. My warning has been that that people need to be careful, that this might be a bait and switch, a trap, not to make Canada more Republican at the end of the day, but to make America more Canadian. And this has been something which I glean not just from the technocracy, like the Technocracy Inc. movement, which never fully disappeared. I'm sure you and probably many of your viewers are aware. It's gone pretty viral. That Elon Musk's grandfather was devoted to a vision of North America under a North American technate, as he was the Saskatchewan head of, or actually I think it was the federal head of the Technocracy Inc. movement, Technocracy Incorporated.
Yeah, way back when.
Way back when. Like, this thing was set up by Howard Scott, who is not even an engineer, but they basically called for, he was using this thesis run by a figure who was very closely tied to the Fabian Society in America through New School, or an outbranch of New York's Columbia University. But New School was created in 1919 by John Dewey and a group of these misanthropic American Fabians, one of which was Thorsten Verblin, who founded Technocracy Alliance, which gave rise to Technocracy Inc. And in that, his thesis was the world Soviet of engineers, those who control the levers of production, need to have a mass strike to shut down society, to sort of accelerate a collapse in order to force a shock into global society, in order for people to recognize that we need to recreate human civilization from scratch the way that these engineers wanted. Very Nietzschean, Ubermenschen type of thinking, very fascistic-y type of organization. And when it was set up, when the Canadian branch was set up, Joshua Haldeman became the head of it very quickly for about 5 or 6 years, until he was arrested for being on the wrong side of World War II, because he did call for the overthrow of the Canadian government while we were fighting fascism. And there's some weird stuff, like, this is the guy who, before that, he was the Saskatchewan head of the Canadian Fabian Society from 1933 to 36. Joshua Haldeman, meaning he was working very closely with all of the Rhodes Scholars in Ottawa who had set up the League for Social Reconstruction, which was the Canadian Fabian Society in 1931. Their political party was the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation that became the NDP later on. That's what he headed in Saskatchewan. And then when he realized that that was not going to get power, he basically headed up Technocracy Inc. To be a member, you had to like give up your name and have your name changed to a bunch of numbers and X's. So that was like every member. There was several million members in North America. It was a pretty big thing. It was surprisingly big, which again causes me to like look twice when I see some of the choices Elon has selected for his own kids, test tube babies and stuff. Like why X's and numbers, right? Like that's things like that. So I know that there's been this, though it was put on the back burner after World War II, it didn't fully disappear. And then when I look at people around Mark Carney, around the Canada 2020 think tank, that Carney's wife is the president of I think she's the head of research and development for the Canada 2020 think tank, Diane Carney. It's like, well, the Canada 2020 think tank was the entity that was set up to purge the Liberal Party of all of the Jean Chrétien liberals that were formerly sort of the more Trumpian, old school, like let's do business deals statesmen. That was the old Liberal Party of Chrétien, little less cooperative to the technate. And the purging of that was overseen by Canada 2020. And amongst those privy councillors who set it up, there was about 8 privy councillors who founded this thing. 2 of them were heads of the task force for the North American Union, John Manley and forgetting the other guy's name. I wrote it's a chapter in one of my books. So the North American Union, what is that? That's effectively the revival, tweaked but a revival of the North American technate. Which they they're really promoting this thing in 2006, 2007 as a solution to the economic collapse that might have been the systemic breakdown. But they're feeling people out to see how much would we resonate to it. They even circulated these publicity coins called the Amaros, modeled on the European Union, the euro. Ultimately, I think it was decided after a few impact studies with the population that we were not ready to give up our sovereignty yet. So they put it on the back burner again, but they're still there. Thomas Axworthy, that's his name. Pierre Elliott Trudeau's former personal secretary, privy councillor, head of Canada 2020 think tank, North American Union task force with John Manley. So these creatures are still there. And this is what Carney directly interfaces with. They brought in Obama. They brought in Larry Summers. They brought in all of the behaviorists who are soon going to take over the USA. Before they did that, they were brought into Canada as well. So that this is like one of the core nodes shaping some longer term subtle strategies. So my fear is that, they might get the US to misstep in the context of a systemic breakdown crisis, which is part of the time bomb of the derivatives bubble that Carney set into motion, or played a role helping to set into motion. I mean, he was the head of the Financial Stability Board from 2011 to 2018 while he was the head of the Bank of England. The Financial Stability Board is the department of the Bank of International Settlements, which oversees directly global derivatives regulation. So he did directly oversee the creation of the derivatives. He directly oversaw, going back to 2010, the creation of the bail-in mechanism, the bail-ins which were brought into the Canadian Bank Acts in 2016 under Justin, but they're also baked into the U.S. bank, or not. It's not called the Bank Acts, I forget, but it's basically U.S. legislation there, as well as the European Central Bank, that gives the authorization to these private banks the next time that they are in a systemic breakdown crisis, instead of getting bailouts from the outside, to be allowed to steal people's savings, pensions, other things, and convert it into bank stock to stay afloat. That's a Carney design with Mario Draghi, who's also was a big player and is a big player in the EU, both Goldman Sachs investment bankers, both eco-warrior, anti-human globalists, both. So, you got very bad ideas. And again, my fear is that Trump is being set up to bring the U.S. back into the fold, as Cecil Rhodes called for in his manifestos that created the Roundtable, that called for the reacquisition of the colonies of the America back under the fold of the British Empire, which also causes me, and I'll just say this, to cringe. Well, I cringe in the deepest fiber of my being when I hear Trump say things to King Charles like, I love you. It's a great idea. We'd love to become associate members of the British Commonwealth. Thanks. Is he playing around? Are these just words? Maybe. I hope they are. But if he actually is dumb enough to think that that's a good idea, again, I get goosebumps, bad goosebumps.
Yeah, there's been enough things that Trump has done, his actions, that I'm like, ooh, I really like that. Ooh, I really like that. And then there's some things where you're like, when he said that, like, what? That didn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, does that make any sense to you?
I get it. Like, I know where it's coming from, I guess. Because, sorry, I'm just chewing. I shouldn't be chewing.
Well, I'm hitting you at supper time, so I'm like, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so I guess he should know better, because there's all kinds of evidence that's indicated to me that he gets that that the entire Russiagate, the entire thing that caused him so much pain, I would imagine, and headache during his first term, was an MI6 directed operation. Christopher Steele was a direct MI6 operative directly under Sir Richard Dearlove, same guy who created the dodgy dossier that justified the war in Iraq. That was not an American creation. It was all made up, but it was created by MI6, given then to Dick Cheney and Colin Powell. That was Sir Richard Dearlove. Dearlove also was the guy who brought in the first draft of the dodgy dossier to Strobe Talbot, a Rhodes Scholar who oversaw Brookings, who then brought in Ivan Dushenko, this sort of hack, 20-year-old nobody Russian masturbator who was just like an intern at Brookings. Yeah, the guy was a perv. But, and he was just given some cash, given this dossier of made up stuff about, prostitutes peeing on Trump, and then was introduced to Christopher Steele, who like hired him. So, you had this whole thing, the smell of the British dirty hand, from Steele to Dearlove to the Rhodes Scholars under Talbot, or Talbot as a Rhodes Scholar. It's just everywhere. So I think Trump even kicked out, rightfully so. British ambassador to the USA, Sir Kim Darush in 2019. Fantastic. Good. He gets it, I thought. But he seems to have this weird admiration for the institution of the hereditary figure itself, of the monarchy, that I think he seems to think is somehow different from this shadow government, nasty structure of influencers around MI6, the GCHQ, the Rhodes Scholars. I think he sees them as if they're separate, somehow as if the noble institution of the crown is threatened by this thing or captured by this thing. And I think that's a blunder, because I think that King Charles especially is very, very self-aware and committed to that very same mission that these creepy agents are also committed to. And King Charles is like a leading figure who ushered in the Great Reset. He was given the authorization by whomever makes these decisions to be the one selected to, introduce to the world the Great Reset in January of 2020 as a new branding. He's the guy who's been assigned. He's been working with Klaus Schwab. He's been a mentor of Klaus Schwab since the 70s. He brought in the Clean Eco Business Council. He brought in the Council for Inclusive Capitalism with the Vatican, the Jesuit-controlled Vatican synergy now that's coming to bear. So Carney and Trump have this weird, there's a lot of overlaps, and I don't think Trump likes Carney. I hope not. But then again, I've also been reading, and I need to substantiate this, but on WikiSpooks, which is pretty reliable, it's made the point that Carney is also a member, a Knight of the Order of Malta, the Sovereign Order of Malta. If that's true, and again, WikiSpooks has been pretty good on their information on these things. If that's true, that would place him directly into the same network of many neocons who are trying to control and influence, or Christian Zionist types who are trying to influence Trump's presidency as well, in regards to empowering Greater Israel in the Middle East, which is creating all sorts of unnecessary risks for World War III there, as if we didn't need, as if we really needed another another point of inflammation, right? There's so many triggers that could possibly unleash World War III. Why that one? But there we go. So there's things like that. And I think that if Trump really is charmed by the institution of the crown, that would be a big blind spot. I hope he's smarter than that.
Well, it's when you talk about, all the different things going on, and then you plop in him putting that out about the monarchy and about the Commonwealth. I don't see the, but once again, it's just one little data point, and I wish, it's not like I follow Trump's every word he does. I don't follow every speech he does. I have a hard enough time keeping up to Carney right now and everything going on in Canada, and just trying to be on top of it. And at times, like one of the things about this side of the world is like, I just think of like burnout. I just think like you sit there and you're trying to like sift through all the things they're doing. And at times you can just get worn out. You're just like, oh, I'm just going to go stand in the wind and let it beat on me for a bit. Like I literally, I'm just tired of listening to these guys, just jockey for position. And like it just mind boggles me that so many Canadians get caught up in the elbows up thing and just can't see past the facade that is Mark Carney. Like, just look at what he's all tied to and then realize what that's tied to. And isn't that what we all just lived through? And we're like, we're going to go anywhere near that? Like, are we insane? I think we're insane. And yet, it's funny. I sit and once again, out in Alberta, this is growing. It's percolating. I would just say it's lightly percolating, and some would probably tell me it's more than that, Shaun. But we had a town hall on Monday, Matt, and it was very little advertising. Just put Alberta independence. We just want to have a chat about it. Nothing crazy. We're not telling you to go pick up your pitchforks. We're not telling you to do anything. We just want to have a chat about it. And we had over 100 people show up, and I put that into comparison to a year ago, almost at the same time. We brought in April Hutchinson and Linda Blade, and we had Rebel News there, and it was like this big to do, and we didn't have half that. And so you go, oh, there's this little thing that's percolating right now because more and more people have went through lots of different things, not to mention COVID being in not so distant rearview mirror. And now you see, like Tamara and Chris and the things they're saying, facing, and the fact they want to repossess the Big Red and sell it off and all these crazy things. And you're like, oh my God. And so like, there's this conversation percolating out here. Right. And there's more and more people going, I'd hate it, but part of me just goes, all right, let's have Mark Carney. East, you want him? Fine. Bring him in. Let's see what happens. Because the pain's got to ratchet up here if we're going to ever get to fixing things. Because it's like our population needs a little bit of pain to activate it.
Mm-hmm. I know. I think about that too sometimes as well, right? Like looking at history and thinking like how it's this weird balance. Like how was it that big changes for the positive, impossibly good changes happened?
Yes.
Yeah. Like whether it's the American Revolution, could that have happened if the population was super satisfied with their life? No, there had to be some abuse, some having your head held underwater in order to like properly appreciate oxygen, So we
all got drowned a little bit by someone else's hand to be like, I just want to breathe again. Can we do that?
It's unfortunate, eh? Like a little bit of pain sometimes has been important to just shake people out of their complacency and delusions, but at the same measure, you don't want to like decapitate the person that you want to fight.
Yes.
The Great Depression, right? Like if we didn't have this crazy ass Great Depression from 22 to 34, and it really the pain continued after 34, but still, if you didn't have that deep existential crisis, would people have understood why it was necessary to break up the banks to allow for the types of projects that were able to be unleashed? Like the rural, like these giant projects that was the New Deal. I don't think so. I think that the people were too happy with just going with the status quo in the 20s. It was easy money, it was the roaring 20s. You could gamble, make money with other people's savings, and nobody's going to hold you accountable. And there was poverty, but things were good times. So yeah, in that sense, the Great Depression was needed, but you could have, in hindsight, the fact that you would be able to get an anti-fascist leader like a Roosevelt, who was able to have the courage to go and risk his life, to go and declare war on Wall Street, to break up the banks, to put hundreds of bankers in jail through the Pecora commissions, to go and undermine the London, the Bank of England was initiating its own solution to the Great Depression in 33, called the London conferences on banking and economic reform. And these conferences were essentially designed to create a one world government under the League of Nations based on a eugenics high priesthood, which, was very likely going to be the way that things were going to go. Every nation who was all 64 nations who participated all said, okay, we'll go along with that, because the Depression became global. The British Empire was still the global hegemon. It wasn't the US dollar yet. It was still the British pound that was the center of global finance. City of London then, just like today, was still the center of world finance. And the Great Depression that they orchestrated artificially was something that they also wanted to solve. And the only nation to pull out of it was the United States. Franklin Roosevelt just said, we're going to pull all of our delegations. We're not going to cooperate. We're not going to sign anything. And without the U.S. participation, the whole thing tanked, thank God, while he was simultaneously declaring war. Now, if you didn't have a character with that type of willingness to fight and die and risk, and you had a lesser person, then that Great Depression could have easily have been solved by some form of hard fascism as well. And there was no shortage of fascist organizations trying to capitalize on people's despair. In Quebec, we had Adrien Arcand. The Quebec Nazi Party was very big. You had I mentioned the League for Social Reconstruction, the Canadian Fabian Society, for calling for a scientific management of Canada, run by 6 Rhodes Scholars back in 31, 32. We had the Fascist International, very, very baked in, as funded by Wall Street and the American Liberty Leagues back in the United States, also pushing their own candidates to bring in an American version of Nazi fascism. The Nazi Party of the United States had huge penetration in Washington, D.C. Madison Square Garden had dozens of events featuring like 40,000 people with like Nazi flags hanging right next to George Washington and the U.S. flag. And that was like the promise that if we go fascist, everyone will get some bread and you could feed your family, not die of starvation, and maybe you'll get a job. And like Mussolini's making trains run on time, so can we. And people were kind of buying that, so that was a direction we could have gone to. Technocracy Inc. was a growing thing for that reason. So this question of balancing like suffering to shake people up versus like killing the people you want to shake, but it's a tough one. I don't know how to play that game. It's tough.
you offer me some hope too, because I'm like, it's like, well, how do you get to those points? Well, people got to be in pain, right? Where you just rattle off, or everything you just rattle off is like, well, what put them there? They wanted bread, right? Like pretty simple things.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it could have went so dark, and instead it went a different way. And to me, that I don't know, that gives a guy a lot of hope, doesn't it?
I think it does. Like there's this the fact that humans are fundamentally good. We fundamentally have this core drive to want to take care of our families, our society, our nation. Like that's a metaphysical sort of baked into being human. And sometimes we just need to be reminded that's there. I think the consumer society that we were born into has made a lot of us soft and out of touch with our deeper humanity. So I think a little bit of that, that fear of God is something, like you said, it's creating a demand. There's more of a hunger. I look at my website. It's spiking in activity in ways I've never seen before. There's people searching now for bigger questions than they'd ever thought to pose. That's good. So, to the degree that thirst is there, and that there are people who are still capable of organizing and conspiring to make good things happen as well as bad things, because both humanity is the creature that conspires. We have ideas about where we believe things should go, and then we try to build relationships of people who can think on the same line as we do, or have some resonance, and we work to make something happen, for good or for, unfortunately, it's more often than not been for bad. the bad guys are better are better at conspiring than the good people have been. So it's a lesson we need to learn fast how to do this well. But I look at Alberta and I get a lot of hope. I often speak to groups in Alberta, and these are some of the most moral, competent people that I've encountered. So that gives me hope. I looked at the Freedom Convoy was a bit of a paradigm changer for me too. I didn't think that Canadians could do things like that. So you don't want to do the same thing twice in a row. The oligarchy will adapt. It's like the Borg. You could shoot them and kill them once, but as soon as you try to use the same technique to kill the Borg the second time, they're already adapted. So you got to kind of be still a bit creative and flexible.
It's true, but I mean, if you just roll up big machinery across a highway, say we're not moving it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
I mean, like, and can one person do that? No, I mean, but you put 1,000 there.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like somebody said to me today, if they come to take Chris Barber's Big Red, there should be 30,000 people standing around and going, "You're not taking it anywhere." Right? And to me, when you have that level of conviction, and that's what we saw on the Freedom Convoy, right? We saw people desperate, and then they saw this glimmer of hope, and they chased that glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
They chased it right across the country. And when they got there, they parked their truck and literally that's all it was. No, we're not moving. And I saw, those people are difficult in the best possible way, right? No, I'm not moving. I'm not moving. You could be arrested. That's fine. I'm not moving. And I just had Randy Hillier on. And I mean, that guy's been doing it for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. Early 2000s. That guy's like one of the OGs of being a protester here in Canada. And I mean, there has been more than him, because obviously that's just in 20 years. There's been more than that. But I hear him, when we were on our way to Ottawa, I had an uncle call me, and he was talking about back in the day in the 80s when they backed up a grain truck to where Pierre Elliott was staying in Saskatchewan and filled the hotel lobby full of grain. And you go oh, there's some original badasses here. Yeah. And we keep saying out here, right? We come from this line of people who came to, specifically here in Alberta, Saskatchewan, to the worst place on planet Earth, pretty much. I mean, it's beautiful, but 100 and some years ago, I mean, you're living in, one of the stories I've read from our area is he came here, couldn't get his house up fast enough, so they lived in a tent, him, his wife, and 3 kids, in minus 40 until spring came, so they could finish building. I'm like, that is some hardy people, man. And we've been softened up 100%. Hard not to when you can drive everywhere and you got a cell phone, the games on and Netflix and just go on and on and on and on. But that's in the line. If they could do it with their lines, right? Oh, all the evil and everything else. It's I don't know. I as dark as I get annoyed with the darkness, because I'm like, only takes a little bit of light and the whole room's bright, and you're just like, what are we worried about? Yeah,
that's a good point, man. That was actually one of the things that really got me excited about being an activist in Canada. Back in 2008, I had met Randy Hillier at a conservative convention in Ontario, and it was right at the moment that he organized this massive encirclement of the legislature, with a bunch of friends that just organized through the Landowners Association, the Ontario Landowners, which at the time he was involved with. And they just made it happen and put a lot of pressure, just like you said, just putting their bodies right in. Well, in this case, it wasn't their bodies, it was their tractors right into it. And good old fashioned brute force, nonviolent, but just good nonviolent brute force worked pretty well at bringing some attention to issues that nobody wanted to talk about. And so you're right. I think that's a tool we always have. It requires, again, just a bit of courage and knowing that you got to stand together. Or as Ben Franklin said, you hang together, or you hang separately. The empire likes to control us through divide to conquer, and to discouraging us from getting our bodies out there, thinking that we're all, it's just us. There's no point trying, because they'll just crush us the second we leave the door. But it's that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you get everybody to think that, and nobody leaves their house. But again, the trucker convoy was a big wake-up call for a lot of people who felt like they were alone, isolated islands, and then discovered that 7 million Canadians think just like them and have all been so terrorized into shutting up and self-censoring that we didn't realize everybody thinks the same way. So
The Cornerstone Forum happening May 10th in Alberta, right? Calgary. You're going to be there speaking, along with a whole cast of characters. I talked to a couple from Ontario, and they were talking to me, and they're like, how many people are going to be there? And I'm like, well, looks like around 600, give or take. And they're like, they said, what? And I'm like, what? Yeah. Actually, they're coming in from all over the place, like all over Canada, through the States. I believe some overseas, like it's going to be, like everybody out here thinks we're nuts. And I'm like, oh, that's part of what the forum's all about. We're going to have some interesting discussion on stage. Or is everybody going to agree? Probably not. And I probably don't want everybody to agree. I like when there's a little bit of back and forth and some new thoughts and some push on some thoughts and everything else. But I think everybody's going to respect one another. And then in the crowd, it's this eclectic group of people that want to connect with people. That's what building community is all about. So it's getting around one another and hearing some different ideas. And what are you doing over there? Oh, should try that. And, like if there's anything that shook out of COVID, there's lots of great things that shook out of COVID. But for me, like the importance of community and how little at times we have of it has just been hard to watch, right? And we got to find ways to build that back to I hate using that term, build it back. Anyways.
No, take it back, man. Take it back. It's all right to use this sequence of words. Take it back better. No, sorry.
I don't know.
I think that look, I remember in the 90s, our family reunions, our family was a much more together unit. It was much more functional. It was dysfunctional, but functionally dysfunctional, and it was fun, and there was always people coming through, friends of the family, cousins. There was like more of a vibrancy, and now I wake up in the morning. I didn't have one of these things until 2005 or 6 or something is when I got my first thing. And I could feel it. I mean, I even see just
2011. I beat you.
You're a holdout, eh?
I was a holdout.
Oh, no, I was weak. But I mean, the original one, I couldn't even go online. My first one, I had the flip phone, right?
Yeah.
Star Trek phone. But yeah, like you see now, even at my Christmas gatherings, things like that. My family can still get together, but the vibrancy is much lower. A lot of the younger people are on these things a lot more. I'm on these things as well, like I check out my thing. I wake up in the morning, I check, my social media, things like that. So it definitely, people have been more atomized, digitized and atomized more than is. These things should be helpful tools, but not to the point that it inhibits us from being human. So I think you're right. Just being able to get out there with other human beings in the flesh, in the real world, to share ideas is like nothing you can get from a Facebook interaction or something like that. And
to think and to know you're sitting in a crowd, and are there a couple people sitting there and they're looking around going, man, these people are crazy? Oh, probably. But for the most part, you're showing up to this event because you want to hear these open discussions, and you're not crazy, and you just want to hear the discussion. And I think for a lot of us, not for me, because I sit here, and I know for you as well, you get to go on a ton of shows. You have your own, you're writing books, you're researching, you're talking to lots of interesting people. But for people driving around listening, they get to listen to a bunch of different thoughts. But to be in the room when all these conversations are going on, and look over at a table, and there's Matt Ehret, and look over there, and there's Tom Luongo, oh, there's the Alex Craner, oh, did you see Martin Armstrong walk in? Like all these names, not to mention some of the wonderful Canadians that are going to be there, and Chuck Prodnick and Jamie Sinclair, military guys, or Kaylin Ford doing wonderful things with classical education, and like on and on and on it goes. And then be like, who's this Bob guy over here? And you start talking to him, and he'll probably have a more interesting story than any of us. And you're like, oh, this is wonderful. Whereas, you go to some, I'm just, like I can't remember the last convention I went to, but like some of the politics stuff that I go to, I'm just like, oh my God, this is so awful. I'm like, and I aim to be the complete opposite of that. I aim to inspire, honestly, and people showing up inspires me to keep going with it.
Yeah, man, that's beautiful. I'm really looking forward to this. This is the first time I've actually gotten to participate in one of your forums, and I'm super stoked. Again, just that's probably the most gratifying thing. Just being able to be a journalist and find myself with some thoughts that that people find some value in and getting invited to speak and build relationships with so many thoughtful people. It's really it's been good food for the soul, as well as just interfacing, because I'm primarily interfacing with people who care about ideas and care about humanity. And despite all of the differences of opinion on elements and predicates, there's this common thing. And everyone that I speak to generally have broken free of normism to varying degrees. And so there's like this ability to speak on a much higher level in a normal, and I take that for granted. Like how, going back in my memory banks a little bit, when I was stuck working a cubicle job, having a self-censor, having to speak on a whisper level when there was somebody else who I know had a common geopolitical worldview as I do, and we had to like go into the staircase and like whisper, our chats about politics and Trump and Putin, but in quiet, because if anybody could overhear us, we might be brought in front of a committee, because it was at a university we were working at, and so it was very isolating and very suffocating. And so I totally get it. Like to be able to create situations for yourself to be able to breathe, like we were talking about. Sometimes you only appreciate oxygen when you've been deprived of it for a while. It's the same thing. This is like the oxygen for the soul, is talking about truth.
That's a very good point, because one of the things through COVID, when I was working in the oil field, there was, and it just slowly dwindled. At the end where I was at, there was 2 of us, right? And that was really difficult. When you talk about being just able to just let it out, I just want to be able to say what I want to say without a repercussion. Those were tough days, and the oxygen is a very good picture to paint, because I think that so many of us, towards the end, you're just like, well, this never end. Well, it just never end. And then, of course, the convoy happens, and it's why it exploded, in my opinion, because everybody wanted a little oxygen. I just want to just be myself. Yeah. But I have to self-censor so much at work. And you can feel it creeping in all over again, right? Like, yeah. I mean, look at we're supposed to have an election where, you can love or hate the Conservatives. I say this over and over and over again, but you're supposed to have, like, we can't vote the Liberals back in. Like, are we insane? Mm-hmm. And yet it looks like the Liberals have a real shot. And I mean, you go back to where we started this conversation, you hear what he's tied to, and I'm like, it's more than a shot, folks. Like, I don't want to believe. There's just part of my brain is I don't want to believe that, what was the name that came up on one of the live streams? He's the Dark Lord, the Dark Lord of Britain. It's like, I don't want to believe he's that nefarious of a human being. And yet I listen to you rattle it off, and it's like, it's so plain. It's sitting right there.
You mean like Voldemort from Harry Potter? Or you mean like, yeah, that's what you meant? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of, eh? Yeah, even on every level, he just fails the morality test. And I mean, this is the worst type of human being to possibly allow anywhere near political culturally. I mean, the guy put his daughter into Tavistock, the Tavistock clinic for gender realignment, and has made that the point that, one of his top priorities is going to be to provide every family and the opportunity to turn their kid into the opposite gender if they want to. Or if they're encouraged to do so or groomed to do so by whatever armada of new, ideological mercenaries will be employed to advise them in schools, So it's just wrong on so many levels. And it helps for me, it's all about print. Like, I try to think about universals a lot, like what's universally always true, and use that as my starting point when I start an analysis. And there's something about the oligarchical way of organizing society and conceptualizing what humans are, which is always true, whether it's ancient Babylon or ancient, the high priesthood running Rome into an empire or today's empire. It's the same thing. They view human beings as talking cows to be controlled by a master class of alphas. That's all they do. And then the thing that they're afraid of is always the same thing. The more truthful idea of natural law, and regardless of whether we're looking at the history of like how this manifested in the fight for emancipation in India, ancient India, or we look at it in China in its deep history, or you look at it in the Western matrix, it's always the same character, though it has different words, different forms, different flavors based on the culture, but it's always the same thing, that there's an idea of human beings made in the image of some quality of moral, creative, reasonable force, God, Allah, whatever. I mean, but there's this idea of this good, loving, reasonable creator that made us in the image that gives us certain inalienable rights, which it's our responsibility to defend and uphold and improve upon those rights, through a political process, through an educational process that we're supposed to fight for and improve as well. So whenever that happens, the oligarchy loses their influence and humanity wins. We improve our lot in life. The the idea of the Malthusian, law of depopulation or overpopulation based on the idea of humans will always overpopulate, over reproduce to the point that they're going to create a pressure on the bounty of nature, which will always necessarily result in a collapse unless the oligarchy can reduce our population under a master class. That idea will not apply. That formula breaks down if we're always encouraging new discoveries, new applications that allow us to leap outside of the limits to growth so that we can support more people. 100 years ago in Canada, where I live, the average life expectancy was about 43 years of age in 1902. Today it could go to 81, 82 on average. You could still live over 100. Of course, COVID cut a couple of years off that, but that's because we fought for at different times the right to make new discoveries, increase and improve upon the productive process. And the oligarchy hates it when we do that. Because again, we prove that we're not just another animal to be managed by a master class. Rabbits and wolves, they have those problems. Their populations will collapse when there's a drought. Their populations will grow when there's bounty, but they're not going to create a hydroelectric dam or they're not going to discover electricity or create flood controls or put food on the side in case there's a drought. They won't do that. And that's fine, that they're animals, that they're good in their own way, but they won't do what humans can do when we're not adapting to an oligarchy. So that's the universals I always try to hold on to. And I try to feed back into my analysis of particulars, whether I'm like, what does Carney represent? What's going on with the different identities within the United States below us? What about Alberta? What's going on there? How can we use this to help chart out something better, knowing that there are these universal principles at play?
How long have you been back in Montreal now? Has it been a week?
About a week.
About a week. What's the vibe there like when it comes to the election? Because I can feel the vibe out in here in Alberta. And then, I try and piece together as many people traveling and seeing what they see and hearing the conversations they hear. And we've been chatting, like it was just last week, talked with a guy from Nova Scotia. And then obviously Randy Hillier in Ontario. When you're walking around, talking to people or seeing things in Montreal, what is the vibe in regards to the election that you see and hear?
Well, I work from home as a journalist, so I don't, and I live in farm country, so I don't go and interface with my fellow Montrealers so much. But I do listen to the radio just to keep my fingers on the pulse a little bit. And I'm getting the sense in the federal election that the Bloc Québécois is going to increase quite a bit of their seats in the federal parliament. That's not the Bloc Québécois will be useful because they'll tend to not go along with whatever Carney does, but they don't really have a vision. They're just like, we're going to defend.
We're going to be Quebec.
We're going to be Quebec, right? They don't care about most anything that doesn't apply directly to Quebec. But it's fine. They're a disruptive force, and that could be fine. There is this fake pseudo-Canadian hubris, this nationalism has even spread in a place like Quebec, which you wouldn't expect it to as much, based on the discourse of the 51st state thing, the U.S. going all jingo-esque to take over Greenland and Canada and the Panama Canal and all that stuff. So it's kind of like awakening this subconscious sort of thing that's even baked in its own particular way into the psyche, the zeitgeist of the Quebecois. So I fear that the Liberals might even win big here, since they're being championed as the only ones who could really stand up properly to the big bad U.S. imperialists. That I wouldn't be surprised if that also happens. Unfortunately, I'm endorsing the PPC. That's my this year, that's what I'm pushing on it. Some of the best people I know are members of that PPC. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Bernier, but I like most of the best people that I know as organizers, activist citizens, who are the most moral, strong people, find themselves as members of that party, and I endorse them. I'd like them to be members of parliament, to be able to stand up and speak truth to so-called power. So I'm gonna endorse that. I think that, there would be, if Trump had just shut the hell up about the whole 51st state thing, I think that the conservatives would have a much more likely shot. And within that context, there's many more business interests that want to do deals and would be much more open to facilitating, some serious economic transactions.
So then it comes back around.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I didn't see the conversation going here over and over again. But when you look at it, and lots of Canadians have thought this, it's like, Trump just shut up.
Yeah.
Conservatives are winning. I think that's what we're saying, right?
Yeah.
So then you go, the Liberals are brilliant because they knew Trump couldn't handle them. Just because if you go down the line, it isn't Trump who says Canada wouldn't have a country, right? It's Justin Trudeau, right? He's the one who says that to Trump when they start talking about tariff. So if you go down that line, you realize how, and I hate this sentence, but how smart the Liberals are. They literally looked at Donald Trump, went, "This is how he's going to react. We're going to send you down there. You're going to say this. We're going to put you in a spot where you can cross your legs funny and you can have your fancy socks and all the things. And Donald Trump is going to eat your lunch. And then it's going to blow up. And because of that, you're going your way out anyways, and we're going to bring in Mark Carney." Yeah. Like that, honestly, when you sit back and think about that, folks, just for a hot second, yeah, that is it. Love or hate the Liberals. That's brilliant.
I mean,
then why is Trump still pushing on it? Why is Trump, and I haven't heard him push on it, I don't think, recently, but certainly for how many weeks after was it where he was still just on and on and on? And heck, half of Canada was, there was a bunch of Canadians, oh, this is amazing, but then it just kept going and going. And now Canada and China, the only two to hit him back with reciprocal tariffs. Did I say that right? I think it is.
Well, it did its damage. That's for sure. I've sort of come to see most of Canada as kabuki theater most of the time throughout our history. Unfortunately, there was, I think, the last time that I saw or recognized any type of authentic care for the interests of Canada as a nation and its people in a confused, messed up way. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to put Jean Chrétien up there into some hero status. I'm not. But again, old school, the guy's like, 96 years old now or something. He's from the old school of statecraft that saw it best to avoid things like World War III in order to do deals, because that's bad for business when you kill all your customers. He didn't want to get Canada dragged into bombing countries we had no business bombing, like Iraq. So he said no, even though there was a lot of pressure. There was pressure to put long-range missiles in the Canadian Arctic by Dick Cheney in 2004 to 2005. And him and his network said they pushed back. It took courage. It took courage to even tell Conrad Black to say, you want to be a British lord? Well, go live in England. Give up your Canadian citizenship, and that took courage. Conrad Black didn't represent a little thing. But all that to say, that's gone. I mean, that got purged by and large from any position of actual having influence. And now, ironically, 20 years later, Justin Trudeau, who was installed as part of this reform, during the Harper years, that was the period you had this sort of palace coup inside of the Liberal Party where a more technocratic ideological system was brought in. People who would think like Chrystia Freeland and her Oxford buddy. I mean, Chrystia is a Rhodes Scholar as well, right? But her and Carney, godfather of her child. That type of character was made more the official handler of the entire party and its internal culture during the Harper years. And now, ironically, Justin Trudeau, April of 2024, does what Chrétien fought against, which is inviting U.S. military industrial contractors to come in and build a long-range ballistic missile system in the Canadian Arctic as part of like this new Arctic Defense Doctrine that was put out in that year. I don't know how far it is in being built, but they agreed upon it, which would normally have been political suicide most of the time for 20 years. And all of a sudden it's done under the radar. Nobody's talking about that. And in preparation for some so-called inevitable war with Russia and or China in the Arctic, where there's, this new bounty of economic activity going on in Eurasia in the Arctic. And so Canada's playing a geopolitically useful but also dangerous role, especially for Canadians who are not going to benefit by any of these things. We're not going up there to develop the resources, which there's an abundance of resources. We could be doing all sorts of really cool things with other nations that want to have a future and want to develop a real, do business. But we're not. We're seeing them as like they're targeted for an oncoming war against the so-called hegemon. So Carney's not against that. He seems to be going along with that too.
Wait. I gotta.
Yeah.
You said nobody's talking about it. I'm like, I have no idea what you just talked about. The Arctic and missiles. What are you talking about?
Oh, there's a new Arctic Defense Doctrine passed in April of 2024 by Justin Trudeau. He signed off on it. I think he doesn't create anything. And that within that Arctic Defense Doctrine, it called for the installation of long-range missiles in the Canada Arctic, which, it's part of a war plan. It's part of the full spectrum dominance strategy encircling Russia and China with long-range missiles that's been going on since 2006.
So the Arctic Defense Doctrine, and that's in partnership with the U.S., or is this just us on our own?
No, it's a partnership with the U.S. I think it plays in. See, this is the thing. I think it plays in. When Trump started calling for an Iron Dome around North America, then I think it was rebranded a few weeks later to a different kind of dome, Victory Dome or something, or Golden Dome. Right?
I thought it was. Now I have somebody yelling at the speaker because they know exactly. I thought it was Fortress North America. Wasn't it Fortress?
Was that the name?
I think it was Fortress North America, wasn't it?
That's a terrible name. No, I think there was another dome idea. I'll just Google it. Trump Dome Shield America. What's it called? Golden Dome. Yeah, he changed it. So it's first called the Iron Dome. Yeah, so it's first called the Iron Dome, modeled on the Israeli Iron Dome. The missile shield around Israel, designed to.
Yes.
So that was the idea, is to take that and make a North American Iron Dome, and people, I guess, thought that was a bad optic, so they were like, let's rename it the Golden Dome instead, and so now it's called the Golden Dome. But it's the same idea, and it falls into alignment with that in I think a way that's a bit dangerous and against the interests even of Americans who wouldn't benefit by that type of thing. But yeah, it's, again, for me, like, the Arctic is such an important part of human history, and the development, the fight over whether that's going to become a theater for cooperation or whether a platform for war is a big deal. And the oligarchy thinks about the Arctic a lot as sort of the final frontier on the earth. And it would be so good if we could just pick up where Lincoln and Tsar Alexander II and Nicholas II and FDR and his vice president in the 40s, where they left off, which was to open it up. Or Diefenbaker, even John Diefenbaker with his Northern Vision. That W.A.C. Bennett with his Peace River development strategy to connect rail into Alaska. That all of that stuff is part of our heritage, part of the real pioneering heritage we could be really proud of, and we're sort of still too disconnected from that better heritage, and so we're not seeing the Arctic for what it is. Though the oligarchy is they think about it so much, but they want to make sure that we that it stays untouched by anything good, and instead is only allowed to be used for warfare, and that's it. Yeah.
And every time you come on, I'm like, I hear new things. I'm like, I don't even know what to do with it. Is there anything we haven't talked about? You're like, we got to talk about this before May 10th. Anything, even before the election, April 28th is only, as people are listening to this, 11 days away. Is there anything in between here and there you're like, we better bring this up? Or can people just go, Matt Ehret's in Alberta, which he is, May 10th, which he is, and just show up there and hear hopefully, I'm looking forward to your keynote speech. But is there anything before you head to this hopefully warming up land of Alberta that you want to get across to the audience?
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of a little bit of a cliffhanger, and as hopefully, less is more, and hopefully that will make people want to come down, or if they didn't already have that nudge that they needed, hopefully this might help a little bit some people out there. But yeah, no, I think that we have potential. We have so much potential, right? It's crazy how much potential we have. As humans, as Canadians, just look at this giant territory. Most of it is untouched. Most of our civilizations, just wrapped 100 kilometers from the U.S. border in like 7 major cities. And I mean, we could really. It's a creative playground of that would cause an educated moral imagination to just really have a field day, as far as really like just going back to the greatest ideas that could be revived in a 21st century context. The Mid-Canada Development Corridor idea. I'm actually going to be bringing some booklets featuring a program for Canada in the 21st century and beyond, to try to just inspire some conversations amongst especially policymakers, but just activist citizens as well, around like what's not being discussed that we could offer to the world and to our kids. So that's something that I'll have a few, a dozen copies which people could pick up. I'll be selling them, but they can pick them up at your event if that's okay. And
absolutely, you got a booth there.
I got a booth. Hey,
yeah, you do.
All right.
Yeah, you do.
Okay,
yeah.
There'll be a lot more books too then, in that case. Haha. But yeah, no, I think that we're really at a place where we have to make a decision about what do we want. What do we want to be as a society, as a species, even? Because we're really, I believe, on the verge of a potential collapse, a dark age. On the one hand, looking at some of the toxic ideas being enforced onto us, and that many good people are being tricked into going along with, that could undo so much of that great potential. On the other hand, I think there is a desire to survive and to thrive, and so I'm hoping that we don't have to feel too much pain. But you've given me something to think about when you were saying, like, maybe in our exasperation, maybe people just need to have a Carney just do a terrible thing to Canada for people to finally stand up and say, no more, we're not going to take it anymore. I hope that that's not the case.
Well, I mean, in one hand, you hope that's all it takes, right?
Yeah.
We've had our taste of authoritarianism and all the things. On the flip side, I have read Solzhenitsyn, and I'm like, are we heading into like 60 years of 80 years of, or are we the slaves in Egypt and it's like 400 years? Like, I can go dark. I don't want to go dark. I prefer not to go dark. I prefer to be, shine some light, and hopefully we don't need to go into those types of like madness and dark days. Hopefully it doesn't need to be hundreds of years of just absolute purgatory of living hell every day, right? Like, to me, there's so much good in the world already, and you just got to stand for it.
And I'll say this, like, for people who want to maybe talk about some of the battle lines where I've seen some more evidence of factions representing power groups in humanity, where I see a fitness to survive. And I agree with Alex Craner and Luongo on this point. Is I've mapped out as much as I can so far. I'm still working on it. The various deep state structures, the fifth columnists, embedded within Russia, within China, within India, within some of the Middle Eastern countries through the Muslim Brotherhood factions. And, there are patriots. There's organized patriotic movements that I think have done a better job than we have in the West at extracting and doing battle with their deep state structures. And when I look at the, those interests and civilizational interests, especially that want to avoid World War III, that want to reject the big depopulation agenda, there is a lot to work with in Eurasia, but there's a cloudiness. There's a lot of misinformation too. So maybe at your conference, that's going to be a point we could chat with the audience, people who want to talk more about that. But I think that gives me a lot of hope as well for those who would like to create creative flanks to help us also purge this deep state complex that's embedded itself within our, the fiber of our shadow governments in the West. I think that there's a lot to work within Eurasia that people don't fully appreciate. So, yeah.
Well, Matt, we're looking forward to having you out in Alberta, and look forward to hearing what you got to say. Either way, thanks for hopping on today, and we'll see you here in a few weeks.
Absolutely. All right, looking forward to it.